from Microbe TV. This is office hours for Wednesday, the 16th of April. 16th of April, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and welcome to your viral corner of the internet where we serve only science. No misinformation, no lies. Only straight science. And this is where you come to get it. And if you're going to bring your misinformation and lies, don't bother. We don't need them. Welcome, everybody. Tonight, for our moderation pleasure, we have Les, we have Vanity Nutrition, we have Tom Steinberg. Thank you for joining us, and thanks, everyone. We have an interesting evening tonight. I am going to give a summary of the trashing of science and universities that's gone on in the past week. And then we'll do a mini lecture, if there's time, on antibodies and T cells. Tell us where you're from, folks. We'll shout you out. Gabriel is in Bristol, England, where it's 6 degrees Celsius. By the way, here, let's see, I'm in New Jersey. It's 9 degrees Celsius. Pretty cloudy. Still not great weather. It's chilly. I'm wearing a winter coat still. Dagfinn is in Norway. 10 degrees and raining at 2 a.m. Will is in Changsha, China, 20C, which is 68F and cloudy. Good morning. Molly N.P. from Hilton Head, 65F. Hilton Head, huh? Hello, Leo. Welcome back. Rainey Parker's here. Visto is in Sydney, Australia, where it's 22C. It's autumn down there. Yeah. Tom is in Western Oregon. Costella, back in Ohio at the moment. Vanity was waitlisted, but Vanity is better than being rejected. You got to look at the plus sides, right? Leo says it's foggy on the Mendocino coast, 54F12C. Gabriel, glad to be back for my second time at office hours. I may not last long. It's 1 a.m. here, but I want to make this a regular part of my week. Rita in Idaho. Welcome. Peter S. in the Colorado Rockies. John, 14C in Minneapolis tonight. And Rainey is in an hour south of Raleigh. We're at 64F. Yeah, RFK died, and RFK Jr. is still with us. Carol, our favorite nephrologist from Bakersfield, 22C. Nice and warm. John is in Southwest Florida, where it's 75. EHS Talent is in Lehigh Valley, PA. John Lasko is in Tampere, Finland. Plus 9C at 3 a.m. Wow. Soul Symphony is from Egypt, but currently in Minnesota. Margot is in Phoenix, where it's 93F. Cheryl is in Southern Ontario, 3 degrees C. Sandra Demetz, hello. You're here again. Where are you from? Remind us. I don't remember. Eliza, Southern Ontario, currently 4C. Wayne is in Urbana, where it's 16C. Soul Symphony wanted to say thank you. You mentioned something in one of your lectures that helped tremendously with my thesis. Glad to hear it, Soul Symphony. Happy birthday, Will. You're older than I am. Laura's in Washington, PA. Sandra is in Mexico, where it's sunny and 20 C. Gary is in Denver. That's right, 1,000 miles northwest of the Gulf of Mexico. That's the name of the thing, and that's the name of it always. Spamlet is in Bedfordshire. Amaryllis flower just opening. Are you getting COVID shots twice annually now, as Daniel seems to suggest? Nope. Nope. I haven't had a COVID shot in a while. My feeling, and this is my personal feeling, I'm not giving you medical advice. I had the original 3, including 1 booster of a different strain, and I think that's enough for me. If I get symptoms, I'm going to take Paxlovid. That's it. I don't think it's necessary to be boosted to get 3 months or 2 months of protection. But that's my opinion. That's me. And I'm qualified to make the decision for me because I could look at the data and make sense of it. Again, he wants people to protect themselves, especially elderly people, right? Because most of the people who are dying are not vaccinated. I don't know if at all or just not recently. Rob wants to know who's Duncan Idaho's. I don't know. Rita's from Idaho. Hello, Hassan in Austin, Texas, 28C. Julie S. is from North Central Pennsylvania. Betty is in Washington Heights. Wasn't there, but I was on Morningside Heights today teaching my class. Maureen from Northeast Ohio, 42F. Sandra lives in Mexico, but I am not exactly from here. You're born in America. I don't know exactly. I don't know if exactly is the right word, but that's fine. Jonathan is in Encinitas, where it's 17C. Sandra's Mexican American. Maybe you were born in the U.S. and now you live in Mexico. I don't know. I call myself Italian American because I was born in the U.S., but my father was born in Italy, and my mother was born in the U.S., but my mother's parents were both born in Italy. So I'm technically Italian American, first generation. Pat is in Nova Scotia, where it's 4 degrees Celsius. Wayne says, Urbana rhymes with banana. In fact, the Twin Cities, Champaign-Urbana, are colloquially called Shambana. Okay. Dave wants to know if previous editions of my book are adequate for a layman. Yeah. I mean, all we do is update it. So and sometimes we have different ways of presenting things. But yeah, it would be fine. Absolutely. Go for it. You got fourth. The fifth is a current. 4, 3, 2, 1, first edition. I'd go for 2 or 3. If you can get 4, that would be great. Hello, Zhu. Austin, Texas, 81. Shingles vaccine next week. There you go. Lollipop wants to know, what's this? Everyone talking about it now, saying the lab leak theory was proved. It's not proved. I don't care who says it. It's not proved. There's zero evidence for a lab leak. The people who are promoting that don't understand the science because there's adequate data in support of a natural origin and zero in support of a lab leak. It's not established fact. Rita says the governor of Idaho just signed a bill to allow over-the-counter sale of ivermectin. Good luck and good riddance with your horse paste, folks. Ridiculous. Oh, Duncan Idaho is a character in Dune. Okay. John says, I trust very few people online to discuss lab leak or better the zoonosis evidence, which is pretty much microbe TV and people who have been guests on shows like TWIV. Yeah, there's plenty of evidence. There's zero evidence that it came from a lab. Zero. I don't know why they keep promoting it. Oh, I know why. It's political. I don't care. Scientists, I don't care. You're wrong. You're wrong. And I'm going to say it to my last breath, okay? SARS-CoV-2 came from nature, not from a lab. Let's just put it this way. I've been working on viruses for 44 years. I made the first infectious clone of a virus genome, meaning you could now modify viruses at will. I know how this works. I see the evidence of where SARS-CoV-2 came from. I know how to interpret it. It didn't come from a lab. It came from nature. And we've done so many programs on this. I'm not going to go through it all again. But they just keep repeating the same old tropes that are useless. Oh my gosh. Gabriel's working on HTLV1. There's substantial research happening in Japan and Australia. Is it positive or negative to do a postdoc abroad, or does it build barriers to returning? Gabriel, I don't know if there's going to be anything to return to, frankly. The science establishment is being destroyed by the current administration, and that's no joke. Too bad you can't stick around, but I'm going to detail what's going on. And you can get marvelous training overseas. And even before, when the U.S. still had science, you could come back if you did good work and kept in touch with American labs. It's not that once you leave, you're gone forever. I know many people who have done postdocs overseas and then come back. Palasathina, hello, welcome. Hello, Carrie in Michigan. So how do I counter the false info that the lab leak was proven real? These people are saying it on the news. You say there is zero evidence. Despite what they say, they don't have any scientific evidence that the virus came from a lab. And there's ample evidence that it spilled over from animals to humans at the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan in December 2019. And that's all you can do because they're not even going to believe you. There's no evidence of a lab source. Zero. Minus 2,000 or whatever. Ay, ay, ay. Please suggest a paper for my lab's upcoming phage-focused journal club. Well, on TWIV, we did one not too long ago. Jolene Ramsey, when she comes on, she does a phage paper. And you should pick that one. It's really good. I'm getting off of the welcomes, but avian flu in geese. They can be infected, yeah. Yep. So, yeah, I would say it's widespread. Okay. I'm going to skip some questions because I want to see where people are from. Then we're going to go back. Tess is from Canton, MA, 44F. Sylvia Bina, thank you for your support of science communication. I know it's not a lab leak, but we need a toolkit counter argument. I can't remember if you made a short. What do you need from me? A short video with bullet points like 5 minutes? What's the point of fighting? I'm not fighting. It came from nature. Let the other people fight over it. Political. It's talent. Peter Marks gave a beautiful interview the other day on Face the Nation. It's great. That would be good. And thank you, Questella, for your support of science communication. We appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to pause, you guys, and I want to talk about stuff. And I have sourced 2 articles for this summary that I'm going to give you. The first is a very nice article by David Gorski at Science-Based Medicine. It's going to be my pick Sunday on TWIV. But basically, let's see. Google. You're such a pain. It's an article by David Gorski called How Bad Is It? RFK Jr.'s Extinction Level Threat to Science-Based Federal Health Policy and Public Health is Here. Extinction level threat. Now, I think everyone here on this program is an understander of the importance of science. But I think a lot of people don't. But also, what's being done to public health and what's being done to universities. All right, so let's go back. Extinction level threat for public health programs and science-based policy. He continues to lie about the measles outbreak. All right. He says there's malnutrition in West Texas, in Gaines County, and in the Mennonite community. He said the doctors that I'm talking to on the ground, the leaders in the community, are reporting that the people who are getting sick are people who are, he says, and the little girl who died, where malnutrition may have been an issue. There's a lot of poverty in that area. Food, it's like a food desert. The best thing Americans can do is keep themselves healthy. It's very, very difficult for measles to kill a healthy person. This is all lies. There is no malnutrition. The little girl did not die of measles because of malnutrition. They're all healthy and well fed. He's friggin' lying. It's so unacceptable. It's very difficult for measles to kill a healthy person. This is BS. We had tens of thousands of kids dying in the 60s who were healthy and well-nourished, and they died of measles. That is just nonsense. It's just a lie it's one of his tropes about measles. He says also, if you're healthy, it's almost impossible for you to be killed by an infectious disease in modern times because we have nutrition. We have access to medicine. It's very, very difficult for any infectious disease to kill a healthy human being. Really? Really? So all the people who died of COVID, not the older people, but the young people who were healthy, what happened to them? This is the most idiotic statement I have ever heard in my life. Of course, infectious diseases hit everyone. And the only way to prevent them is, guess what? The thing he's not mentioning, vaccination. It gets better, folks. So RFK Jr. visited the FDA this week. He said, the deep state is real. The FDA has been captured by industry. He said the industry pays them to recommend what they want. Well, the vaccines are recommended by industry because they want to sell them. Huh. There's no evidence for that whatsoever, folks. Zero. Now, he's decided to discover the causes of rising autism rates by September. He says, we've launched a massive testing and research effort. It's going to involve hundreds of scientists from around the world. We're going to identify the cause, and we'll be able to eliminate these exposures. I'll tell you what's going to happen. He's going to make up fake data that vaccines cause autism, and he's going to use that as an excuse to cancel vaccines. Okay? That's going to happen this year. He's going to cancel at least one vaccine very soon. Now, who's in charge of that? The FDA, right? They license vaccines, among other things. Who's the head of the FDA? Marty Makary. It's another piece of work. Now, Marty Makary is anti-COVID vaccines, but he's not anti-vaccines in general. He does other dumb things that we've talked about before. So what is he going to do? Is he going to stand up to RFK and say, no, I'm not canceling this vaccine, in which case he gets fired? I don't think he wants to do that. Too much hubris. Or does he go along with it, cancel the vaccine, and then he will live in infamy? These are David Gorski's words, as the doctor who most enabled vaccine-preventable diseases to return and ravage our children. These people think there's no consequence for their actions. Now, you may, just kind of on a side thing here, you may know that in Milwaukee, they're concerned about elevated lead levels in the city's public schools. And recently, the CDC told Milwaukee, sorry, we can't investigate this because the people who would normally do it have been fired by RFK Jr. And he said, oh, they asked him about it. And he said, oh, I think that was a mistake. There are some programs that were cut. They're being reinstated. I think that's one of them, he said. And there have been a number of cases where programs were cut who shouldn't have been. David Gorski calls this malignant incompetence. Oh, I cut the wrong program. This is not how government works. You do your friggin' homework first. But nobody does homework. Nobody reads anything from the top all the way down in this administration. And it's very clear that if you don't obey, you're going to be fired. So Peter Marks was fired. He's forced to resign. And he wrote in his wonderful resignation letter, he tried to work with RFK Jr., but it became clear that truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies. Now, I don't personally know Peter Marks, but I've seen him talk a bit. And those are pretty strong words for him because he's a pretty conservative guy, okay? And so he was pissed off at what's going on. Okay, so that is one part. You're going to see vaccines canceled for sure. So you better be scared. Maybe not for you, but for your friends who have kids and need to be vaccinated. You should be damn scared because there are going to be a lot of infectious diseases here in the U.S. Part of the overall plan. To make chaos again so that dictator can take over. All right. How about science? NIH is also screwed. So in the standard grant, one of the standard grants in NIH was a 5-year grant. It's called an R01. And, you would get it. And then, you don't get all 5 years of money at once. You get a year at a time. And then you file a progress report. And usually you get your money for 5 years, unless you really, really screw up totally. But very, very few grants have been canceled. Now they're being canceled left and right. And basically, if RFK Jr. doesn't like your science, you're not going to get funded. One guy who knows no science is going to decide whether you get funded or not. In the past, we had a panel, say certain virus grants would be reviewed by a panel of 20 experts and formulate their opinion. That's what you want. And it wasn't easy. Had many grants rejected. And you have to try over and over again. This is not madness. So as of 7th of April, this is data from Nature, the NIH has canceled 770 research grants. All right, so they just said, grant's over. Give me any warning. Grant's over. We're taking the money back. 29% of the grants terminated were for grants that mentioned HIV/AIDS. I don't know why they have to cancel those. It's still a great problem. But obviously, this is this conservative Christian idea that all of government is corrupt, all of these agencies are corrupt, and they all have to be destroyed. But why HIV research? They probably think it's immoral to get HIV, and they want to cancel it. Okay, 29% of the grants for HIV were canceled. 24% of grants related to the health of transgender people were canceled. Because they don't believe, this conservative Christian MAGA baloney, they don't believe that a transgender is real. There's just a male and a female, and that's it. So, fine, you can believe whatever you want, but don't force it on the whole country, because these are people who deserve to get what they want. 24% of grants related to transgender health. 17% of grants related to COVID. COVID's not a problem anymore. We don't need it. That's so stupid, it's unbelievable. I've talked about that before. And 3.5% of climate-related grants. Also, half of any grant that has LGBT, LGBTQ, or LGBTQ plus in it is gone. Any grant with transgender in it is gone. 200 grants. Any grant with that's studying vaccine hesitancy is gone. 44 grants. 45% terminated. Okay? And if you think those are the only areas that are going to be terminated, you're wrong. It's just the beginning. They're going to terminate left and right. It's very hard for me to do this because I'll tell you why this is so important. Okay, what about universities? So how does that play into all of this? Well, it's a good, so first of all, the Department of Education sent letters to 60 universities back in March. They sent letters to 60 universities under investigation for anti-Semitic discrimination and harassment. This is by the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. And, you know, the list has all the universities. Boston University, Brown University, Cal State Sacramento, Columbia, Cornell, Drexel, George Mason, Harvard University, Lafayette, Lehigh, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers, Princeton, I'm skipping some over, Stanford, SUNY System, Temple, Swarthmore, Tufts, Tulane, UC System, all the campuses, Yale University. Okay? Get with it. Now, I'm the first to agree that we don't need anti-Semitism. We should not have any anti-Semitism. But that's being used as an excuse to harass these universities. And in fact, Columbia had already programs planned to deal with anti-Semitism when Trump harassed them. Now, why are universities being targeted? What's the thing? Is Trump pissed that his kid didn't get into Columbia? No, it goes way more than that. This has to do with, again, conservative Christian beliefs and how they think this country should be run. American universities are an amazing star of our economic power. It's a magnet. They are a magnet for talent that attract people from all over the world. So why would conservatives want to destroy them? The answer is conservatives hate universities because they are where free thought occurs. And there people organize into liberal places and they hate that. The liberals are at the universities. Smart people, whether they're center right, center left, or left, generally support core liberal values of intellectual freedom, fairness, and the rule of law, all of which are being attacked now, notice. That leads people in academics, including scientists, to oppose the authoritarian conservatism, this autocratic and oligarchic U.S. Republican Party that we're seeing right now. Now, universities also have a privileged place in public debate. Scholars weigh in on all sorts of issues, this climate claims, public health claims. Universities are independent arbiters of truth in a free society. They push back on autocrats. That's a reason why this administration hates universities so much. They limit the power of autocrats. So Trump and his colleagues are seeking to politicize, damage, and corrupt universities. And they're doing it through NIH first, like we just discussed, and that will help destroy the U.S. universities. So not only the grants are being cut, but all the indirect costs, which are the monies you get to keep your facility running at universities, they're being all cut to 15%. So the university purge began with Columbia. And they used controlling anti-Semitism as an excuse, but then it went way beyond that. They had all kinds of other demands. They wanted to have a role in certain faculty hires and what kinds of courses are taught and so forth. So the former president, Katrina Armstrong, seemed ready to capitulate to all the admin demands, although it seemed like they would be endless. As soon as you capitulate, they're going to give you more because they don't bargain fairly. And that didn't go over well with the faculty. So she was fired. Meanwhile, Trump makes incredible demands of Harvard. And in response, the Harvard president says, forget it. We're not doing anything for you. So there's a letter online from the president of Harvard. It's really excellent. Here's a quote. Unprecedented demands made by the federal government are being made to control the Harvard community. They include requirements to audit the viewpoints of our student body, faculty, staff, and to reduce the power of students, faculty, and administrators targeted because of their ideologic views. We have informed the administration through our legal counsel that we will not accept their proposed agreement. The university will not surrender the independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. So most of these ultimatums are tangentially connected to the the Trump administration's stated ambition of erasing anti-Semitism on campus. That's an excuse for getting in the door. So after the Harvard president said that, Columbia, now we have a new acting president, Claire Shipman at Columbia. She said in a note sent to campus, she pledged that the school would not allow the federal government to require us to relinquish our independence and autonomy. So at least now Columbia is getting some spine, and I hope all the other universities follow through. Now, this is not easy because upon receipt of the Harvard letter, Trump immediately canceled X billion dollars of research grants. And then he said, I'm going to take away your tax exempt status. So all this is babying and bullying, right? To begin with, the demands are unconstitutional. As the president said, they violate their constitutional rights. So you're going to see a lot of lawyers working on this in the next year. Here's what's at stake, folks. The backbone of American innovation is a partnership between government, universities, and industry. And this is from a Nature article. Now, how the United States became a science superpower and how quickly it could crumble. The U.S. government remains the largest source of academic research and development funding globally, with a budget of $200 billion US for federal R&D in the financial year 2025. Of this money, more than 24 research agencies direct grants to universities totaling $59 billion in 2023, with the NIH and the National Science Foundation being the biggest ones. And these agencies do it for a reason. They want professors to do research for them. In exchange, the agencies get basic research from universities that move science forward, or applied research that creates potential products. And by partnering with universities, the agencies get more value for money and quicker innovation than if they did all the research themselves. And of course, in the meantime, you're training future scientists. This is because universities can leverage their investments with other funds that they draw in. It's not just the government funds that universities are using. For example, in 2023, U.S. universities received $28 billion from charitable donations, $6 billion from industrial collaborations, $6 billion from nonprofits, $5 billion from state and local governments, and $3 billion from other sources, boosting that $59 billion in grants to $108 billion. And that goes into research labs. But what makes the U.S. system even more powerful is what happens to the university research. It's the engine for creating startups and jobs. In 2023, listen to this, folks, U.S. universities licensed 3,000 patents, 3,200 copyrights, and 1,600 other licenses to technology startups and existing companies. These firms spin off more than 1,100 science-based startups each year, which leads to countless products. And finally, closing this loop, these technology startups also get a yearly $4 billion injection in seed funding grants from some of the research agencies. And venture capital finally adds a whopping $171 billion to scale those investments. Huge, huge circle of discovery and innovation. So it's amazing. And Trump and his conservative Christian cronies want to break it all. And it can't be replaced by anything else. And I'm telling you, once it's broken, it's going to be very hard to fix. And there's all kinds of implications for, other countries and their interactions with us as well. So why I've told you why they want to destroy universities. I've told you why they want to destroy NIH, FDA, CDC. They think they're all corrupt and at the hands of pharma, so they want to get rid of them all. If they get their way, a lot of people in the U.S. are going to die. It's just unacceptable. Who is going to be held responsible? Okay. Let's get back to some questions here. If we hypothetically entertain the idea that RFK has about making a measles antiviral, would it even work? I didn't know that he was entertaining such a thing. But if you wait till the rash, it's too late. So you need to have a diagnostic that could pick it up earlier. Well, the NP says Mennonites are well fed. Many are farmers. I grew up and worked in a very Mennonite area. They are well nourished. Yes, of course. He is lying about all of it. Yes, Elizabeth says even if she was malnourished, all the more reason she should have been vaccinated. Not that excuses is lies. Well, the thing is, all the military gets vaccines, as we mentioned last week. Someone should mention that to RFK Jr. And yes, the deep state is now real. He is the deep state. Him and the entire current admin. Molly says, my daughter with autism will have a tantrum. She gets so mad at anti-vaxxers. Oh, either they fudge the numbers or find nothing. No. They will fudge the numbers. You can bet on it. He's in control of everything. He can say, wow, we found these data showing this. And no screaming from any scientist will help because they'll all be fired anyway. Good question, Dagfin. How does RFK Jr. know autism is caused by exposures? He said there has to be an environmental toxin. That's his. So this is what he's all about. He has an idea and he wants to prove it. He doesn't say, what is the cause of autism? He says, autism is caused by environmental exposures, and we're going to find out. So that's not the way you do science. Why would he know? He's not a scientist. Friggin' lawyer. You know what Shakespeare said? Vincent, your eloquent health science rants would make you a great new face on Mary Trump's Nerd Avengers. He's already firing on all guns herself. But you have the data already in your head. No thanks. Not doing it. I do my... Now, Visto says Eric Topo is the latest to be forced out. What are you talking about? Let's see. He's not at the NIH. So I don't know what you're talking about. He was forced out. I don't know what you're talking about. We got to keep with the facts here, Visto. Garth says, what are the chances that there's clowns get imprisoned for their actions against healthcare? Zero, because Trump is in control of the whole law system. The Department of Justice, the FBI, whatever, nothing is going to be investigated. You saw this signal gate. Nothing happening, even though it was so in violation of so many things, and people should definitely be prosecuted. It's unfortunately For Trump, he didn't know about it. It tells you another thing. The president doesn't know about a military operation like that. Anyway, nothing will happen as long as these bozos are in control. Yeah, malignant incompetence. Yep, I like that phrase. That's David Gorski. Thank you, David. The Wikipedia entry for PBR 322 now has an unpopular culture section. I think we talked about that on Twiv, right? Yeah. Chang, is RFK Jr.'s redirection from infectious to chronic diseases misguided, since many chronic diseases begin as an infection? Absolutely misguided. First of all, yes, many chronic diseases begin as an infection, and every person on Earth is chronically infected with at least a dozen viruses. That's a chronic disease in many cases. So it's just an excuse to destroy infectious disease research, which he thinks is corrupt, without providing any evidence for that, by the way. He'll say, oh, the evidence is all out there. Yeah, where? Out there where? In your backyard? Wondering what's happening in your country. Are you serious? We've been talking about it for weeks. Measles is spreading all over the place. Yes, it's taking off in other states. Yes, Jenster. Measles here, like in 20 states. Does anyone know the future of COVID vaccines? Do you want my opinion? Their history. That's my opinion. So Novavax will never get licensed. You see, that's why they delayed it, because they're never going to do it. And I think they're going to find reasons to cancel the mRNA vaccines, and then we're done. Yep. HIV is still in the U.S., Molly. Many infections a day. Not as many as in other places, but many infections a day. Yep. Carol, every morning I'm overcome with despair by this administration's policies, but I have to remain optimistic for my children and soon-to-be grandchild. Well, I get overwhelmed with despair as well. I'm not terribly optimistic because what's happening to counter all of this nonsense? Where are the scientists? Where are the Democrats speaking out on a daily basis about this? Nothing. Abdur Rahman, hello from Manhattan. Nice to have you here. What about you, Penn? Let's see if it's on the. Yeah, they're getting grants taken away from them too. Yep. I'm just going to look at the original letter again to see if they're on the list. So they're not on that original list, but they have been contacted and threatened to have money taken away from them unless they correct things. Here's the link to the letter to the universities. Their idea is to privatize medical research. Well, it's already privatized in companies, but don't you understand that the government, university, farm company triumvirate was the source of power in American science? This incredible collaboration. And so putting it all in private companies is not the way to go, because a company will never match the diversity of a university, the different viewpoints that you can have. At a company, they're all focused on one goal, but in a university, they'll say, well, wait, there's this here that could be a problem. I'm not saying that company people are not smart, but the diversity in universities is amazing. Anti-Semitic means anyone criticizing Israel for its war crimes in Gaza, especially on university campuses, many led by both Jewish and non-Jews. Yes, I think that's a big part of it, but there are also unacceptable statements as well, right? Soul Symphony, I want to hear your opinion. What's your opinion on persistent viruses encoding proteins that induce type 1 interferons? Well, all viruses induce interferons, right? And persistent viruses, they can't, because they have to antagonize it. Otherwise, they get cleared by the interferon system, okay? So every virus has to antagonize interferon in some way, including persistent viruses. So no, it's not going to be a mechanism of persistence. There's another good point by Kang. The administration values lies, where in contrast, universities value truth. Incredible. Everything. You can't trust anyone in the administration from top down to tell you the truth about anything. And I'm just going to talk about the science, but there are other things they lie about left and right. What are my thoughts on Jay Bhattacharya, the new NIH head? Completely inappropriate. Okay? I mean, I ought to just quote David Gorski, but I did put out a video on Jay. Okay? So here's what I wrote. So first of all, they call him an epidemiologist, but he's not. He's a health economist. He's interested in money. At the beginning of the pandemic, he argued that lockdowns and closures were not needed. Flawed view. Although the virus causes many mild infections, many are also lethal, leading to over 1.2 million deaths in the U.S. He argued that herd immunity would protect the population from disease. But today, with nearly everyone vaccinated or infected, there's still up to 1,000 deaths a week from COVID. And how could he justify allowing infections to spread unchecked when many end up causing long COVID, even in young people? He also believes the virus came from a lab. And so it's just, how can you have an NIH head who thinks that way? It's fine to have contrary views, but he's wrong. He's simply wrong. Now, let me tell you what David, forgot his name already. Hold on, folks. Hold on. Office hours. David Gorski. Okay, I'll have to pull it up here because he really writes beautifully, and his comments on Jay Bhattacharya are really good. So let's go to science-based medicine, and we will go to extinction level threat. Okay, so Jay Bhattacharya. You should read this article. It's so bloody good. It's so bloody good. Where is this Jay? Sorry, folks. I really want to find this so I can read it to you, but I'm not finding it. Okay, here we go. Bhattacharya, he complained about being canceled, which meant he was sharply criticized by former NIH director Francis Collins. who referred to him as a fringe epidemiologist, and he's not an epidemiologist. And Gorski writes, I would add that I only half agree with Dr. Collins. Bhattacharya is indeed quite fringe, but he's not an epidemiologist. He's a health economist, and it showed. The Great Barrington Declaration, which he co-authored, advocated for a let-or-rip approach to the pandemic among the healthy in order to achieve natural herd immunity faster, while weakly suggesting focused protection of high-risk populations without any concrete strategies to do so. The document was truly about economics and opening the country back up. Human toll be damned. That's Jay Bhattacharya for you. Fits perfectly, the Great Barrington Declaration fits perfectly with the conservative Christian document for remaking the U.S. Thank you for asking that. Yes. Yes, I will say yes, that's all. Mandrake, I don't understand the fact that these alt med types are okay taking ivermectin but not MMR. No, there's no. If you're looking for consistency, you're not going to find it. Ivermectin is being hidden by the government and by big pharma because it's cheap and they want you to buy their expensive vaccines and antivirals. So such BS. It's just mind-boggling. Yeah, if refusal to return Garcia makes it debatable how much weight the Constitution holds right now. Well, we can't give up. People are fighting this, right? 9-0. It's crazy. If the toxin was coal, would it be covered up? Yeah, because Trump wants to revive the coal industry. So I read an interesting article today. You know, he had these miners next to him at the White House announcing this new support of coal. He said, these guys love to mine. You know, in China, they do that too, but they're phasing it out in favor of robots because it's dangerous for people. You think, well, first of all, there should be no future for coal here at all. There are much better alternative energy sources. But at least you should get the guys out of the mines. It's crazy. Okay, yes, Kevin Holfost out of NIH Topol was reporting. There you go. Thank you. Thank you very much. How long will it take to get research running? So if it's completely destroyed, which would happen over the next 4 years, oh, I don't know if you could. I mean, this research establishment that is the U.S. government, industry, research, universities took 80 years to build originally. I don't know that it can be rebuilt. That's the thing, folks. You have to really prevent this from happening. We still have some time. As a Angry Penguin writes, as a response to tariffs on Canada, I heard a Canadian journalist suggest the provinces set up funds to poach science talent from the U.S. Well, many U.S. scientists are going to want to leave because they can't do science here. So I think it's fine to hire U.S. scientists. Many countries should do that for sure. An old interview with neurologist said a virus might be a cause. Well, there isn't any evidence. The one vaccine that has been looked at extensively with respect to autism is, of course, measles, mumps, rubella, MMR, and there's no connection. Over a dozen studies. Could an unknown virus be involved? Sure, but there's no evidence for that, right? So to say something like that is just dumb because it puts ideas into the media when there is no data to support it. Matteo, what do you think of the studies RFK is allegedly about to publish? Well, he said by September. Oh, they will be all forged, all fake. As I said, he's going to look at the incident. This is a very simple thing he's going to do. He's going to look at the incidence of autism in vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. And he'll find that it's probably higher in vaccinated children because parents of vaccinated children give them better health care, right? So they get more diagnosis of autism. But other kinds of approaches to looking at that question, not that simple one, have shown no connection between autism and vaccines. You can find plenty of kids with autism who have never gotten a vaccine, and plenty of kids who got vaccines who never had autism. Do you think Shingrix will be shown to reduce Alzheimer's? Well, right now they're looking at, I don't know if there's studies on Shingrix, but they're looking at herpes simplex viruses, right? There's a long-term study giving people who had just started early onset Alzheimer's some herpes antivirals. And so I'm not aware of anything like that for Shingrix. Maybe this is part of the goal, create a system where the wealthy will get real health care. The rest of us can have cod liver oil. It's a pattern in countries run by dictators, right? You keep people sick and keep them down, and they won't complain. Hello, Riptic Comp from Boulder. Welcome. Bernie Sanders and AOC are giving speeches to sell out crowds, even in red states, as I've noticed. Democrat Congress people are showing up in red districts because the DJT GOPers are afraid of their own constituents. Well, let's hope they keep pushing and it keeps growing. And we see some of these special elections go favorably, and then in 2 years change power in Congress. Hopefully that's not too long, right? Patricia, so I guess the next pandemic with these people, they will let it rip. Well, they'll be very slow, I think. But yes, they will let it rip. Jibin says, what makes a virus a good oncolytic virus? Well, we used to think it was just killing tumor cells specifically, right? Not other cells. You don't want the virus to damage other normal cells. But it turns out that an oncolytic virus doesn't have to kill all the tumor cells. In fact, it's very hard to do that. The oncolytic virus kills some of the cells, and that activates the immune response that then comes in and helps to clean up the rest of the tumor. That's what we're learning makes a good oncolytic virus. Now, I mean, still a good oncolytic virus should only infect tumor cells and not normal cells. So that's another desired property. With respect to the let it rip, the scientists did not know enough about the virus and what the implications. Yes, that was my point when I criticized the Great Barrington. We on Twiv criticized it originally. You don't know enough about this virus to say let it rip. How stupid is that? And now we know that you get long COVID, which we didn't know back then. It's really, really bad. So that's why Bhattacharya should not be running NIH. Oh, Jeff, it sounds so simple. But many people do not know that the GOP is the enemy, and part of it is misinformation. They listen to Fox News, who says that they are great and that the tariffs are great and they're going to make America great again. It's really hard to fight all that misinformation and lies. Hmm? Aubrey says, no electrical company is going to back coal, who's going back to coal because of the cost of dealing with the ash. Steel is another matter. Anyone in the chat from China? Yes, Will is here. Curious to hear how much you despise our government or our people. Well, Will is an American, right? An expat, so I don't think he's the right person to answer that. Coal is dead, Jeff says. Power plant operators are going to natural gas that is cheaper, cleaner, and also produces less CO2. Visto, any studies on HPV vaccine in older adults to prevent cancer? No, there are no ongoing studies. That's why it's only recommended for up to, 45 years of age. Oh, Tess. Of all the behavioral disorders, autism has the largest genetic component. You heard what RFK Jr. said today. Genes can't cause epidemics. There's no way that genes are involved in autism. It has to be an environmental contaminant. There's plenty of data, as you say, indicating a genetic component. It doesn't fit his hypothesis. Kang says, according to Stillman Drake, Galileo was not tortured, but shown the instruments of torture. Yes, so they said, you have to admit that the Earth is the center of the solar system. Otherwise, here are these instruments of torture. So he said, okay, the Earth is the center. And then when he left the tribunal, he said, pour s'y move. And still it moves. The Earth moves. It doesn't sit still. It friggin' moves. So that's the famous saying, pour s'y move. On the other hand, we are being tortured by this administration's irrational policies. Indeed. Yes, here's a good point. They don't realize that today's science is an evolutionary stage. There is nowhere to go back to start again. The old is gone. We cannot remine the same gold. Yep. It's an evolutionary continuum, right? Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, I think this is right, but the GOP agenda is to recreate the Gilded Age with the wealthy oligarchs in command because according to libertarians and even Christians, they are better people who should lead without government interference. So there's this idea that some people are better than others, which I totally don't agree with. Everybody is created equal at birth. I firmly believe that. And for people to say, no, it's not true, you're just You're just jealous. Patricia says we should all try to be part of a movement. We can't rely on one or the other party or on politicians. Be part of a movement and push for change. Write your representatives and senators every week and tell them, I don't like what's going on here. Yes, I think universities are the right place to protest. But for Columbia, it wasn't handled properly. They let people set up tents. No. You come, you do your protest, then you leave. They should have kicked them out. And it's only because they set up the tent communities that we had problems. Didn't handle it well. Hello, Noir. Good to see you. Hope you're well. Is long COVID manifestation in the brain characterized? Well, there have been multiple studies. Brain volume, but also, brain-based properties, like cognitive issues and memory and so forth. They have all been studied, and they are all down in long COVID patients, for sure. John says Dr. Offit was in another documentary, Virulent, a Vaccine War, streaming free. It made good points that anti-vax has been getting organized over the decades, which made COVID backlash much worse. Genetic risk factors are a thing, RFK Jr. Yes, read some papers. Tess says the Great Leap Forward in the Cultural Revolution destroyed Chinese science. It did come back, but it took 50 years. Well, it's doing very well now, so maybe there is a chance. Will is listening to David Pakman. Helps distinguish between objective neutrality and whether our access to news comes from genuine news agencies and opinion channels. It's really remarkable to me that Trump wants to muzzle all of these news channels, and he just denied access to AP, Reuters, I think, some other news sources to the White House press conference. They can't come anymore. This is just blatantly obvious what he's trying to do. By the way, I was on Pac-Man twice during the pandemic, Will. I liked him very much. Thanks, John, for your contribution to science communication. Really appreciate it. And thanks, Parallaxed, for your contribution as well. Really appreciate it. Okay. I want to do a mini lecture now. So, folks, sit back. Stop chatting about politics and the crap that's going on. I want you to listen to this mini lecture now about antibodies and T cells. Okay? Please? Please? You're not listening. Stop chatting about politics. You can do it at the end. This will take half an hour. Then you can go back to it. Antibodies and T cells. Okay. Remember last time we talked about intrinsic and innate defenses. Intrinsic, which are always present, and innate, which are induced by infection. But antibodies and T cells are part of what we call the adaptive immune system because they are tailored to the pathogen and they have memory. So that's what we're going to talk. We're going to talk about a part of the adaptive immune system today to keep it simple. And one of those parts is antibodies. You've heard a lot about antibodies, right? They're big proteins that circulate in your blood. They're in your mucosal layers. And they're made of 4 chains, 2 heavy and 2 light. These are protein chains. And the very tip of the antibodies are what binds an antigen. An antigen is something that's bound by an antibody. Okay, and when you get injected with an antigen, you have a antibody response. In about 3 to 4 weeks, you can see it peaks, and then it goes down. That's the normal thing. It doesn't stay up forever. It never will. You can't have it up forever. But you do have memory after this. You have memory cells that remember your antigen. And then if you see the antigen again, you respond really quickly and more intensely. But not immediately. So if you get infected with a virus, there's going to be a delay before you make antibodies. And in that time, you can get sick. So you will never have a sterilizing vaccine. Never, never, never. It goes against how the immune system works. And people who talk about it are ridiculous. Okay, so that's antibodies. We'll talk about these in a moment. And then we have the cell-mediated immunity, T cells, cytotoxic T cells, CTL. These kill infected cells. So here's a virus-infected cell. The CD8 CTL recognizes that it's infected and kills it. And this is a big part of infection as well, resistance to infection. So there are some cases where these T cells can prevent the amplification of an infection because they're killing the infected cells. And they can also help you recover from an infection. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There are other cells of the adaptive system, of course, but I wanted to keep it simple. So terms that people may have heard, but they're not sure what they mean, leukocytes and lymphocytes. So a leukocyte is a general term for a white blood cell. What's a white blood cell? Anything that's not red, right? Monocytes, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, and neutrophils. So lymphocytes are a subset of leukocytes. They include T cells and B cells, which we'll talk about today, and also NK cells. And they have surface receptors that can detect antigens. Okay? Those are the cells of the immune system. And here's how they're made, by the way. In your bone marrow, it's amazing. You have what's called a multipotential hematopoietic stem cell, which is self-renewing. It can multiply and you can get more of them. This can differentiate into 2 different lineages. One lineage here on the right is the lymphoid progenitor. This is the precursor to lymphocytes. And on the left is the myeloid progenitor. This is the precursor to basophils, neutrophils, eosinophils, and macrophages, and so forth. Okay? So that's just where these cells come from. If your bone marrow is wiped out, you have a lot of problems making all of these cells, obviously. All right, back to innate immunity. Remember, we said you have some virus-infected cells. They're sensing infection by the innate system. And then those cells make cytokines, including interferons. The cytokines attract immature dendritic cells, which are an important sensor of things foreign, and they become activated. They go to the lymph node, they go to the local lymph capillaries, and they go to the lymph node where they interact with T cells, and that gives rise to antibodies and cytotoxic T lymphocytes. So I want to talk a little bit about how that happens today, what happens in this lymph node. So the immature dendritic cells, these are patrolling your whole body, as I said last time. At this very moment, they are patrolling your whole body. And they are patrolling in an immature way. These cells are like a toolbox. They have everything. They have innate receptors so they can say, oh, there's a virus here. Let's make some cytokines. They have receptors for cytokines. They can pick up dead and dying cells and bring it to the lymph node, as you'll see. They can make interferon. But when they get activated by an infection, this is what they look like. They develop these dendritic processes. They put on their surface MHC class 2 proteins, which display viral peptides. So if they've picked up any viral peptides, they're now displaying them, these little orange boxes on the surface of MHC. And then in the lymph node, they go into the lymph node, they're going to interact with a T cell, a naive T cell that has never seen antigen before. Okay? And the dendritic cell is going to present a virus protein peptide, virus protein derived peptide to the naive T cell. And if it's foreign, the T cell is going to become activated and you're going to get antibodies and cytotoxic T lymphocytes made. Okay. That's the magic that happens. That's the bridge between innate and adaptive immunity. So the antigen presenting cell, the dendritic cell, picks up viral products, brings them into the lymph node. If they're foreign, it initiates an adaptive response. All right, now these lymph nodes are very important. That's where the dendritic cells go. And when a T cell recognizes a peptide brought in by a dendritic cell, it undergoes massive cell proliferation. Now, typically about 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000 B or T cells recognize any given antigen. But in 1 or 2 weeks, you get a up to 50,000-fold amplification of the T cells. That causes your lymph nodes to swell. That's called lymphadenopathy. And you can see here this map of lymph nodes in this young lady. They're not all in places where you could feel them, right? They're deep in your legs and abdomen and arms and so forth. But in the groin and also under your chin, you can feel the lymph nodes. And so if you have an upper tract infection, they will swell because T cells are multiplying in response to detection of a foreign antigen. So next time you have a little sniffle, feel your lymph nodes under there, and you can feel immunology in action. Really amazing. Lymphadenopathy. So the lymph node has areas where they're mostly T cells, and that's where the dendritic cells go with their antigen. Then there are areas where they're mostly B cells. And the B cells are going to contact the antigen as well, but in a different way. The dendritic cells bring the antigen to the T cell region. Okay, so here's a summary of everything that happens. Let's go through it very slowly. So we have our T cells that they originate in the bone marrow. They mature in the thymus, and then they come out and go to the lymphoid organs like lymph nodes as naive cells, like we've been just talking about. And then when an antigen is presented to the T cell by a dendritic cell, several things happen. First of all, the T cell becomes activated, and it can become one of two kinds of T cell. It can become a CD4 T cell, or it can become a cytotoxic T lymphocyte, which kills virus-infected cells, as I showed you, or I told you not too long ago. The CD4 cells make cytokines. These are proteins that have activities, and they can make a variety of different kinds of cytokines. But one kind, called Th1, helps to make cytotoxic T lymphocytes. And another kind of cytokine called Th2 helps B cells make antibodies. So we have two things going on here. In the lymph node, we have the activation of T cells to become either helper or CTLs. And then we have the production of antibodies from B cells. So B cells are in the lymph nodes as well. They have on their surface antibodies of all kinds of specificities. And they sit there in the lymph node, and lymph nodes are filtering your tissue fluids. And so any viruses that are replicating in near local lymph nodes are going to be brought in to the lymph node. They'll bind one of these antibodies on the B cell surface. Could be a virus particle, could be a protein. It will be recognized by the antibody. This B cell now differentiates into a plasma cell, which makes a ton of antibodies. And those antibodies go out into the circulation and deal with virus infections. So that's how that works. Now, I've used a couple of words let me make sure we understand them. And an antigen is a molecule that induces an immune response. It could be protein, DNA, RNA, lipid, sugar, anything. An epitope is part of the antigen that's bound by antibody or the T cell receptor. So here we have antibody binding an antigen through an epitope shown in red, a couple, 8, 10 amino acids. A monoclonal antibody is against a single epitope, and your serum contains a mixture of monoclonal antibodies. We call it polyclonal serum. So that's antibodies, antigens, and epitopes. The amazing thing about B cells, we have 3 times 10 to the 11th different B cells in us that can recognize 3 times 10 to the 11th unique antigens, right? So these B cells that I showed you here, there are 3 times 10 to the 11th of those. Each one has an antibody that recognizes a different epitope. How do you get so many? This happens in the bone marrow where B cells develop. So in our genome, we have the genes to make antibodies. And we have the various parts of the antibody called V or D or J, etc. And all of these things recombine and splice in different ways, just different random ways. And that gives you 10 to the 11th combinations, 10 to the 11th unique antibodies on the surface of B cells. Now, each B cell only has one antibody, but this is how they are generated. And the B cell encounters the antigen, can do that in the lymph node. And then another process called affinity maturation occurs, which makes the antibodies even bind to the antigens with even greater affinity. This is amazing, just remarkable. We have all kinds of antibodies. We have IgA, IgD, that's on the surface of B cells. We have IgE primarily involved in allergies. We have IgG and IgM. And when you encounter an antigen, typically you make first IgM, this dark colored line. Here we put poliovirus into an animal and we're measuring polio antibody. And then that's followed by IgG. Now IgG is the major systemic immunity involved in controlling virus disease. And until that can get going, IgM is made, it can be made very quickly. And then secretory IgA follows later. Secretory IgA is made by these plasma cells. Remember, the plasma cells are what B cells differentiate into once they encounter antigen. They make a lot of antibody, and IgA-specific plasma cells, the antibody, this is a epithelial cell at a mucosal barrier. The antibody can be taken up and brought to the surface and put in mucus, where it can, be at a first-line defense against viruses. Now, some antibodies are neutralizing, which means they prevent infection. And if you're at mucosal surfaces, that could prevent infection of mucosal cells. And we believe that these are important early on to keep the viral loads low so you don't get sick. But not all antiviral antibodies neutralize infection. We do all our assays to characterize vaccines and the antibodies they induce using neutralization. But in fact, there are other ways that antibodies work as well. This is a neutralization assay. You do a plaque assay with a fixed number of plaques, and then you add decreasing amounts of, say, antibodies on the top here. And you can see at the high concentrations, it neutralizes, it blocks plaque formation, it neutralizes, but eventually you can dilute that out. And we use this in COVID. We gave people convalescent plasma from people who had recovered. We purified plasma from them. We could give that for prophylaxis or therapy. And then later on, we made antibodies, monoclonal antibodies. Remember Bam Bam? Eventually, these weren't used because variants arose that were resistant. It only took an amino acid change in the spike to make it resistant. But for a while, we were using these quite a bit. Now, how do antibodies neutralize? It depends on the virus. For SARS-CoV-2, most of them block attachment, but they can also block endocytosis. They can block encoding, which means release of the genome from the virus particle, or they can make the virus aggregate, and that blocks infection. So there are many ways that antibodies can block infection. So now I hope you are seeing that antibodies can play an important role in infection. And if they're present at the onset of an infection, say because you've been recently vaccinated, they will keep viral loads down, and they will, as a consequence, modify disease. The parts of the viruses that bind antibodies are called neutralization antigenic sites. And here for poliovirus, you can see the white ones are where the antibodies bind. They're on the surface. For the HA of influenza, these colored areas are throughout the HA where antibodies can bind and block infection. SARS-CoV-2, same idea. This is the spike of SARS-CoV-2. And the majority of neutralizing antibodies are in the receptor binding motif here and the N-terminal domain, as you can see. This is a picture of antibodies bound to poliovirus. There are 5 antibodies, each recognizing a single epitope around each 5-fold axis of the particle. Okay, sometimes antibodies can act without neutralizing. Here's an example where an antibody has grabbed a virus, but it hasn't neutralized it. But the antibody is then bound to receptors, say on a macrophage. The virus particle is taken up and destroyed. So these are non-neutralizing antibodies, which have been shown to be important for disease protection of many viruses. All right, now cytotoxic T lymphocytes. They recognize a virus-infected cell because via MHC, these cells have peptides displayed from the virus that's inside. And if the CTL recognizes it, it kills the virus-infected cell. What it does, it makes a couple of proteins, one called perforin that makes a pore in the membrane of the virus-infected cell. And then granzyme B goes through the pore and induces programmed cell death or apoptosis. So that's what the CTLs do after they have been produced from naive T cells by activation by dendritic cells. So that's what we've seen here. I've told you that the dendritic cell lymph node interaction can result in antibodies or T cells. Some viruses, one is more important than the other. So how is the correct response made? Well, it depends on the interaction of the dendritic cell with the T cell in the lymph node. The kind of interaction, the peptide, the cytokines that are produced will all determine whether you favor making CTLs or antibodies. And here's an example of that. The T cells make contact in the lymph nodes with cells that are presenting antigens, and the information exchange causes differentiation into Th1 or Th2. There are many kinds of Th cells or T cells that can be made, but the Th1s help to make CTLs and the Th2 help to make antibody production. Now, these adaptive responses that we've talked about also provide memory. And so if the host is infected with the same virus, you have a more rapid and specific. And memory is the basis for vaccination. Let's see how this works. How do we know there's a thing called memory? Well, because of experiments in the Faroe Islands. Well, not experiments, but epidemiological observations by Peter Panum in the Faroe Islands. So in 1781, there was an outbreak of measles. The Faroes are north of the UK, and back then, the only contact the people had with others are through ships that would come through and bring supplies and so forth. So presumably, periodically, the people on these ships would bring measles in. So there's an outbreak in 1781. And then for the next 65 years, no measles. And in these outbreaks, 90% or more of the population would be infected because they're all immune naive. In 1846, there was another outbreak of measles. None of those who survived the 1781 contracted measles, showing that there is immune memory to infection. It can last a long time without re-exposure to viruses. So practically speaking, right, if you see your first infection gives you this initial immune response, that establishes memory. And then if you see the same virus again, you have a rapid and more intense response and a milder inapparent infection. Not zero. You still get infected because there's always a delay. Can't make antibodies and T cells immediately. There's a couple days delay in which time you can still get infected. So there's no sterilizing immunity. What is immunological memory? Well, for B cells, it consists of memory B cells in the spleen or lymph node. So some of these B cells that have been activated become memory cells. And then later on, if they see antigen again, they will rapidly make the right antibody for that antigen. There are also long-lived plasma cells in the bone marrow. And then there are memory T cells as well. But before we go to memory T cells, I showed you this a couple of weeks ago. I'll show it again. Many studies have been done to look for antibodies to viruses at different times after infection. And the presence of antibody indicates the presence of memory B cells. So look at these viruses that cause systemic infections. They spread through the blood. It's amazing. 30 years, 75 years, 65 years, 75 years. And then you go to mucosal infections and they're short. Why the difference exists, we have no idea. Okay? And this is an impediment to making a durable mucosal vaccine against mucosal viruses. T cell immunity, same thing. When you get the T cell activated in the lymph node, it proliferates, right? It makes a lot of T cells. It makes all kinds of, so here's your naive T cell. It differentiates into effector cells of all sorts. Effectors meaning they do the job, right? So some of them can go into organs and clear the infection by lysing cells and so forth. And then they go down after infection, as you can see here. They peak and then they go down, and then you're left with memory T cells. You have circulating memory T cells, some are in the blood, some are in lymphoid organs, and then you have non-circulating T cells, which are inside of organs that were once infected. So the effector cells, these orange ones, those are the CTLs, for example. They don't live forever. They go away, but they're replaced by memory cells that can be reactivated on contact with antigen and immediately become cytotoxic T lymphocytes. All right. So that's antibodies and T cells, folks. Hope you liked it. I'm going to go back to our chat. So Les has an interesting story. In August 1623, Cardinal Barberini, admirer of Galileo, was elected Pope. Urban VIII, Galileo believed that with the new Pope as a friend, let's find the second part, the atmosphere might change, and he started writing the dialogue, named the church guy Simplicus in the book. That's cool. Kang is confused by the term passive vaccination. Isn't the mother's immunity, maternal antibodies, transferring passive immunity and not the vaccine stimulating the baby's immunity? Yeah, passive immunity is giving someone antibodies or T cells, but mainly we talk about antibodies. So the mother gives antibodies to the developing fetus over the placenta, right? And they protect the baby after birth for about 6 months. And then we give people antibodies, as I've told you, and that's passive vaccination, right? So the baby gets antibodies, they go down, and then the baby own immune system develops so it can respond. Ryan wants to know if SARS-CoV-2 induces persistent infections. I have never seen any evidence that this virus induces persistent infections. Chinese science is now doing so well because their scientists were taught in American first-class universities. Many of them were. I remember times when we had always many graduate students from China, and all very good. But yeah, they have now no need to come to the U.S. anymore because they have their own science establishment very well developed. Yeah, so the mini lecture was part of a full lecture on adaptive immunity, which you can go see. Will says, I remember Mark stating 5 years that T cells do not get weakened. Recently, I've read studies showing that some long COVID is linked to weakened T cells. Yeah, but I'm not sure if that's correct or not. We need to see more. Yeah. Leuko is Greek for white. Lymph nodes are like police stations where cells exchange mugshots of bad guys. That could be, yeah. Dendritic cells are like Swiss Army white blood cells. That's right. Do T cells have eyes? No, they have a receptor called the T cell receptor that if it recognizes the peptide being presented to it by the dendritic cell, the T cell will then become activated. Virion boy, is there a reason why FC effector functions like antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity play a greater role in controlling some viruses and not others? I don't think it's the same for all viruses. And I don't know why some would use it and others not. So we're just really beginning to study it in more detail. But for example, there are some antibodies that completely protect against disease and they're not neutralizing. They do things like ADCC. Spleen is another lymphoid organ. Lots of T and B cells. They can go there. Instead of a lymph node, they can go to the spleen as well. So the things I've told you about T and B cells can happen in the spleen as well. And that can make antibodies too, and T cells. 3 times 10 to the 11 is a very small number when talking about combinations. Yeah, it is small, but for a biological system, it's pretty good. And in fact, you have in you a B cell with an antibody that will recognize some synthetic antigen that doesn't exist in nature. That's how many that is. Risto! How's the decision of self and non-self made? Well, I didn't really talk much about it, but when you're undergoing fetal development, your T cells are being educated in the thymus. And all the T cells that you have are presented with all of the peptides derived from all of your proteins, human proteins. And any T cells that recognize them are killed. And so you eliminate self T cells during thymic development. All right, so when you are now born, any T cells you have, in theory, should only recognize non-self peptides. And so if the T cell recognizes the peptide that the dendritic cell is presenting, then by definition, it's non-self and the T cell becomes activated. In practice, though, it's not 100% working, right? So there are some people have autoimmune diseases. They make antibodies against their own proteins. There you have some failure at the level of getting rid of those T cells. Okay. Okay. Glad you liked it, folks. Oh, the AP sued to get White House access and was successful. It seems to me that would be a no-brainer, right? But I'm surprised that the White House agreed. Because they could put a goon at the door and say, you can't come in. Ariozone wants to know if there's a book or paper on the evolution of the hominid immune system. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know one. But here's a paper. I don't know if you'll be able to suss it. I might not even be able to. But here's the link to a review article. It might be good. Soul Symphony wants to know if exhaustion of CTLs can be a mechanism of persistence. Yes, it is. In fact, for hepatitis B, the T cells attacking the liver cells that are infected eventually get exhausted and they stop doing it. And that's why, and the same thing happens in certain cancers, and that's why checkpoint therapy revives the T cells to start killing again. Can it be interferon mediated? You mean the exhaustion of the CTL? I don't know. That's a good question, but I don't know. Are you still teaching? You bet. I teach a course at Columbia every spring on virology, which is what I'm doing now. We have 5 lectures left. Yeah. And then I teach in other people's courses at the medical center every now and then as well. And I even teach in a journalism school class at Columbia. If you listen to me long enough, you'll learn a lot of biology. I'm trying to give you what I know. That's my goal, right? And over the years, I've learned how to teach so I can be more effective at giving you information. When people have food allergies, are the B cells responsible? We just did an immune on that, right? Let's look. I don't remember. Yes. And the antibodies involved are IgE, not the other ones. But yes, the B cells are involved. Implosive Alloy had an intro to neuroscience course in college. The more I learn about the body, the more amazed I am it works. Yeah, it's amazing that it works. It's really complicated. Lots of systems working together. It works. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing what evolution can do. Mark, 4 types of allergic reactions: T cells, B cells, mast cells, and basophils. Thank you. Yes, the T cells go to a very strict kindergarten. Yes. If you react, you're dead. Why don't we have antibodies against our microbiota? We do. But it has to be kept in check, obviously, right? So we do make antibodies against our microbiome, but they have to be regulated so they don't eliminate the microbiome. So there's a very careful balance between the microbiome and the immune system. Are the amino acid sequences at the antibody binding site the same between individuals? So if against the same epitope, you're asking. Yeah, they can be. They can be, but sometimes you can make specific antibodies as well. So your T cells basically act as a help for your immune system. They do act as help, but remember the cytotoxic T lymphocytes, they're T cells. They kill virus-infected cells, so they're part of the immune system. Do individual memory T cells have a different lifespan? Yeah. Some of these memory T cells can live hundreds of days, and that's part of the reason why it's hard to eliminate HIV, because the HIV genome is integrated into the memory T cell, right, which is a long-lived cell, and it divides, and so you make new ones, and they transfer the genome. So very, very difficult to get rid of it. I teach in a J class, in the J school, a class taught by Jonathan Weiner, who has a Pulitzer for Beak of the Finch. His book, really good. It's a class on science writing, and so I teach a 3-hour class on viruses. So none of in any given year, none of them has any science background. Okay, none. Yet they're taking they want to write science journalism, so they have to take a course in it. And so I try and teach them some virology. Yeah. If you don't have T cells, yeah, you have big problems. So T cells are important for regulating many virus infections, but also cancers are killed by T cells. And if they don't work, cancers get bigger. Arthur just read the CDC is recommending COVID vaccines for people over 65. The rest of you can get it. They're saying, but for them, they really should get it. But everyone else can get it if they want. It's up to you. Why do we not attack proteins that make up foods? Well, sometimes you do, and you get food allergies, right? That's a good question. We don't really know, but they don't seem to activate T cells, for example, that will cause damage. I really couldn't tell you. I just know that we've done a couple of episodes on immune understanding what is involved in food allergies. But why they don't attack proteins that make up food is a good question. Well, in the end, amino acids are all the same, right? So if they get digested to amino acids in the stomach, that's it. Not going to be any immune response. And so that leaves the mucosal surfaces, and I'm not sure why that doesn't happen. Yeah. Aubrey, even DJT isn't ready to mess around with court orders directed to actions here in the U.S. They haven't nullified the First Amendment yet. Do you think they will? They would love to, I'm sure. But do you think they will? Probably because our mothers ate similar foods. I will ask my immune colleagues on Tuesday, where we're going to record another immune episode, and I'll find out from them what prevents you from making immune response against foods. I mean, some people must, right? I do think it's an ongoing investigation. Anybody else have questions? We have pretty good concurrence between likes and views. What strategy for HIV cure do you think would be most realistic? So the problem is that you have the viral DNA integrated into these long-lived memory T cells, right? And how do you get rid of it? There have been a number of different strategies that people use. One is they give you a drug that activates those memory T cells. So now they start making virus, and then you hit with an antiviral, and that basically gets rid of all the virus that's produced by these T cells. So the idea is you have to activate all the T cells. I don't know if that's possible. I think we have to do some kind of gene editing, but not with CRISPR because it has too many off-target effects. I think eventually, and there are other gene editing techniques being developed that have less off-target effects, and then you could deliver a gene editor by a virus to your memory T cells and have it cut out the provirus, the viral DNA, for example. I think eventually it will, but Marius, I don't know if we're going to get to that point in American science. Maybe somebody else will do it in another country. Yeah. Yeah. The diet that's digested to tiny peptides, so maybe that's not immunogenic. Or amino acids, right? How does herpes evade our immune system? It has multiple evasive proteins. It interferes with MHC presentation. For example, so you have a herpes-infected cell. Normally the cell would present peptides on MHC2 on the surface. And the virus has proteins that remove it from the surface of the cell. It also has various proteins that antagonize DNA sensors, innate DNA sensors. Right? So lots of different antagonists. Pranav, do microbes act differently when they're near each other than when isolated? Absolutely. It's a whole field of quorum sensing where microbes secrete chemicals so they can detect each other. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Can we produce antibodies to prions? No, they're our own proteins. We can't make antibodies to them. No. Do I plan to do a course on HIV? I don't. I just have one lecture or 3/4 of a lecture on HIV in my current course. I had originally wanted to make a second course on viruses, but it never happened, and I'm not sure it will. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed tonight's office hours. I hope you were sufficiently scared about what's happening to universities and science and public health here in the U.S. It is not good, folks, and somehow these bozos are in charge. I don't know how we got here, but we have to fix it. Why they make some pills too big to swallow and others so tiny? You have to ask the pharmaceutical companies that. It's all a matter of how much medication is in each one, right? So if the smaller ones, you don't need a lot. Yeah. I want to thank our moderators for being here tonight. Les was here. Les was here. Who else was here? Tom Steinberg was here. Everybody was active. Who else was here? In the beginning, was Steph here? Oh, Vanity Nutrition was here, for sure. Anyway, thanks, guys and gals, for doing the mod for us. I really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for coming. Always good questions. And we'll be back next week, so let's see what the date is. Today is the 16th. We're getting through April. Oh boy, does it go quickly. Wednesday, the 23rd of April, we will have office hours. The same day we have TWEVO live stream at 1 p.m. Eastern. So thanks, everybody, for coming and bringing your questions. Hope to see you next week. Until then, please be safe. Bye-bye.